Well, voters in Japan are heading to the polls today after the country's new leader called a snap election earlier this month.
It's being seen as a big test for new Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, who is seeking to solidify his position following a period of political turbulence. Joining us now is Tobias Harris, who's the founder of the Japan Foresight political risk advisory firm. Tobias, thanks so much for coming on this morning. How much of a gamble is this snap election for Prime Minister Ishiba?
Well, it was certainly a gamble when he called it because his party, of course, has seen its approval ratings fall due to a sustained corruption scandal. And then immediately after he took office as prime minister on October 1st, he had some of the lowest approval ratings a new prime minister has had since the start of this century. So it turned into a big risk, and it's only gotten bigger because it looks as if the public is really ready to punish his party at the polls tomorrow.
So take us through who the other contenders are in this election.
So you have, of course, the Liberal Democratic Party, which is governed with the exception of a handful of years since 1955. It also has its coalition partner, Komeito, and that really is what to watch. The LDP and Komeito are hoping to hold on to a bare absolute majority of 233 seats. And facing them, you have the Constitutional Democratic Party, which is sort of an offshoot of the Democratic Party of Japan that governed from 2009 to 2012, and then a handful of other smaller opposition parties. And so what it really looks like is the LDP is probably going to come out of this as the largest party. It seems very unlikely that they won't be the largest party, but whether they and their coalition partner can get to that majority line is really a huge question, and you have polls suggesting that that's not going to happen.
So in that case, how likely is it that the election will force the LDP to enter more of a power-sharing deal, and what would that mean for the leadership?
Well, so that certainly seems more likely than not that you're going to have the ruling coalition. Maybe they're a little short of that 233 line. Maybe they need a handful of seats more. And there's already been discussions, or at least hints at the possibility of talks with some of the smaller opposition parties, some of which are more to the center or center right, that might be willing to at least cooperate on a case-by-case basis. Maybe there's a possibility of reaching a coalition agreement, although it's not going to be easy. And I don't think really any of the opposition parties want to help the LDP out at this point. So, I mean, it's just as likely that you'd almost have a minority LDP Komeito government that's sort of trying to govern on a issue by issue basis, getting votes from the opposition as it needs be. But the vulnerability of the government then to a no confidence motion, to people leaving the LDP if they don't like what the prime minister is doing, it's going to result in, I think, a very unpredictable, very unstable situation for some time to come. What's
been front of mind for voters this election campaign?
Really, it's this corruption scandal. So a year or so ago, you had revelations that the LDP, parts of the LDP were using essentially slush funds, kicking donations back to members and basically skirting campaign finance laws that require reporting how those funds were used. And it really, I think, broke the public's trust and confidence in the LDP. And ultimately, that has been the issue that's been front of mind. The LDP and Ishiba, since he became prime minister, has been trying to deal with that, trying to show that he's willing to take steps to root out the problems in the party and to really restore trust. And so far, I don't think that message has really fallen really resonated with the public. And the opposition has really tried to hammer home that more needs to be done. The LDP can't really be trusted, that it hasn't taken the steps that it needs to do to restore public confidence. So ultimately, that really is what this election's been about, really not about policy differences.
Given the growing tensions with China, what are the security implications of this result for both Japan but also the region, including Australia?
I think the biggest question is, well, for the last 12 years or so, since the late Prime Minister Abe came back to power in 2012, Japan really has had stable politics, and stable politics has enabled Japan to really be, I think, a regional leader, to articulate new ways of cooperation with Australia and other countries. Really, that enabled, I think, Japan to be the, really a creator of the Quad and really help build out the Quad. Japan has been, I think, a predictable partner for countries, and that's going to be a lot harder if Japan's politics are more unstable going forward. If you have weaker governments, if you have regular leadership changes, it's just going to be harder for Japan to be the kind of country that can articulate a new approach, that can really push forward initiatives. Because if we don't know who's going to be prime minister in 6 months or a year, it's going to be hard for the government to really be able to put those ideas out there. And so that really is, I think, as far as Japan's international role, I think that really is the consequence if you see a new period of instability.
All right, Tobias Harris, we really appreciate your insights this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.